Yes, good morning YouTube. So I need a piece of foam. This is going to go in my filament storage box, and what I need is a piece of foam about twice that thick that I can put on the lid of the box and sit down on the filament spool to put a little bit of friction on there to keep it from spinning too fast. So I have some of this corrugated packing foam, and I find if you cut right down one set of peaks, you can flip that over and move it over half a cycle there, and that's about the thickness of the foam I need. And this is fairly soft because I need to have it squish down on the spool to provide a little bit of friction there. So let me cut this other one here and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Okay, there I have my two pieces, and I find this is just a little bit narrower than the filament spool, and what I have is some of this spray-on adhesive. So I'm going to hit the surfaces there with just a light mist. I'm basically making myself a thick piece of foam. I could probably go out and buy a piece of foam, but this is all I need. Okay, give it a light spray of spray adhesive, and then just stick them together and give them a good squish. Yeah, I think that'll hold. I mean, it's not a high strength setup by any means. In fact, this is how they make this foam. It's originally one piece this thick, and then they punch fingers in here. All the low points have fingers pushed in, and it ends up making a straight line. So they actually cut this with a straight line, and then you take the fingers out, and that's what leaves the curves in there. So I'm just putting this back together like it was originally. I'll just cut off the two ends that I don't need, and then just take this guy and I'll cut him like right in the middle. So I got two foam blocks there. So let's go up and take a look at the printer filament box. Yeah, so this is what I'm going to be doing with these foam blocks. You can see I've got one just glued onto the lid of the box, and then that foam rides in the valley of the filament spool. I'll show you here. Here I've got one here, and the idea is that foam block just kind of sits down inside of here and puts just a little bit of drag on the filament, so that when the printer pulls out a length of filament really fast, the wheel doesn't keep spinning. So here's the side of the printer here, and it's got a 12-inch 300 millimeter travel front to back, and if it's got the filament pulled tight back here, and then it's got to move the extruder clear to the front of the printer. If it's moving 100 millimeters a second, in 3 seconds it's going to pull out 300 millimeters of filament, and that's going to get the spool down here is going to, that's going to do a couple of revolutions, pulling a foot of filament off that spool. Yeah, in fact, the other thing I'm going to do right now, you can see I've got the filament coming off the bottom of the spool. First I tried coming off the top of the spool so that it came straight into my feed tube over on the side. And in that case, I was having a problem with too much filament spooling out. The spool would get spinning, and then you would get too much filament and it would come off the spool. So I switched it so it's feeding off the bottom. That with the foam seems to work. What I want to try to do is I'll flip the spool over and let it feed off the top, because if I feed off the top I get a little less friction going into the tube, because the filament's coming straight off and going out through the tube instead of coming up and making that bend. I figure with this open cell foam that adds just a bit of friction in the right spot, because that friction keeps the spool from freewheeling, and I'm getting rid of the friction over here that really isn't helping anything. These feed throughs here, you don't have to clip the filament down to the spool. So filament's held out here in the feed-through tube, and then the sponge on the top keeps the spool from spinning so the filament doesn't unwind itself just sitting in there, and you don't have to fool with filament clips and all that stuff. The only time you have to clip it is if you're taking a full spool out and going to put it someplace, and you need to do something with the extra filament. But otherwise it holds the filament in place, and you don't have loose ends, and you don't have those big rat's nests of filament inside. So yeah, I think this is getting pretty close to an ideal setup here. So I'll show you what it looks like when I get a little farther on here, get it all wrapped up. As always, thanks for watching.